Welcome back. If you've watched my last puzzle solving video on Lichess, you'll know that I did horribly. I think I failed all the puzzles that I attempted. Also, my last couple of rapid games, I missed some things, and my last couple of games against bots, I missed some mates in too. So today, I'm going to try to solve some puzzles on Lichess, and I'm going to focus on checkmate in 2. As you can see, my puzzle rating here is very low now. Supposedly, I have a checkmate in 2 in this position, and I am playing with the white pieces. The black king has just moved into the middle. Let's see, I have a check here. Now I know that mate in 2s don't always begin with check. Sometimes there's positioning a piece first. If I move that bishop, they'll just take this rook. So that's probably not it. Right now the rook is protected. Their king only has one choice of move. If I moved my rook here to cut off this whole file, and that rook is protected, no, that still wouldn't result in a mate in 2 because then they could attack here and I would take back their rook and then they would take there. So that's not it. Supposedly I have a checkmate in 2. What is it? Is it moving this here? Because that would set up a checkmate right there. That would be checkmate, correct? Okay, so what would they play if I moved my rook to e1? Again, they could go here and check, and when I took back, that would be the second move. So that would not be a mate in 2 to move this rook over. Okay, I have another check here. Can the king get out of that? No, it can't. So they would have to block and I would take. So I'm pretty sure that that's it. Hopefully that is it. Okay, they have to block, and that's checkmate. Wow, that took me too long to find. Oh, but I got points for it. Okay, that's one thing you don't get on the other site if you're solving puzzles by theme. Here, if you do solve puzzles by theme, you do get rating points, even though they're not very many. I think to get to the next one, I just click the thumbs up button. Are we still under mate in 2? Yes, okay. I am playing with the black pieces. Enemy king is down here. Well, let's see, it's not there. Right? It can't be that because of the rook and the bishop are both guarding that square. And I don't even think it's check here because, oh, I see it. I was going to say it couldn't be that either because the rook or the bishop could block on that square. But no, it's here because I have a rook guarding that. No, their knight's guarding that square. Wow, that's not it either. Or is it? I think that might be it because in that situation, if they move the king to the corner, then I have a mate. If they take with the knight, then this rook goes down here and that's mate. I think that's it. Okay, they did take with the knight and that's checkmate. Oh, I got 8 points for that one. Nice, because it was rated over 2,000. All right. Well, maybe I can do these for a while and get my rating back up. Next. It helps to know that you have a mate in 2. I think here it's this. That's a check. The only way out of that is to take with the bishop, and then I will come down with my queen, guarded by my other rook, and I think that's checkmate. Oh, I thought they were going to take with the bishop. Okay, well, then it's got to be here, right? That threw me off. I expected the bishop to capture, but the king moved instead. So either way, it was mate in 2. Next. See, I should have spotted that option before I played it, because that could have made it a mate in 3 or something. Playing with the black pieces, I have a king right here. Well, that's not mate because the queen can take, and that's not it because the pawn can take, and then my rook would be unprotected. Let's see, what is it? Check here. Queen takes. I have to take back one of 2 ways. Yeah, that's not it. Oh, wait, there's a bishop here. Does that have something to do with it? I think that might have something to do with it. What if I checked here with the rook on a3? It looks like the pawn would just take, but my bishop guards that square from way down here. Would that be the only legal move? Because my other rook is cutting off these squares here, and my queen's cutting off these. My bishop is cutting off all of this. So I think if I put my rook on a3, the only choice would be to take with the pawn. And then when I took with my queen, that would be mate, because my queen would cut off all of these squares. Okay, I had to see this bishop down here. Without that bishop, that didn't work. Okay, next puzzle. All right, this is interesting. My king guards these 2 pieces, and that piece, of course, is their own. So all of those squares are cut off to the king. My pawn cuts off this from the king, and of course my knight cuts off that one and that one. And my rook and pawn both cut this off. So would that be check? Mate? No, that would not be check because their knight guards that square. What about this? That might be it. That might be it because I don't need my rook to guard this, so I can give up the rook. There's no way out of this other than the knight taking, right? And then my other knight goes here, and I think that's mate because my pawn still cuts off this. Their knight would be in the way here. My D knight would be cutting off this square, and we already mentioned knight, pawn, and my knight from over there would be hitting this, these 2 pieces, and this one would be in the way of their own, and then my king cuts off that. So I think it's the rook first, and then here with the knight. it's increasingly difficult for me to see which squares around the king are cut off by which pieces. You'd think I would be getting better at that by now, but I'm still needing lots of practice on that. And I probably should even be practicing it without using the arrows and the circles on the board, but that's what I've got to do right now. My 2 pawns cut off all 3 of those squares directly in front of the king, if I don't move them. My knight's cutting off one of those, but I don't need my knight to cut off that square because, again, the pawns. I could check with the knight down to f7. That would leave the king only one legal move, which would come toward the knight. And then would that be checkmate? No, because that would undefend the knight. Very sneaky. So maybe I need to play that first. No, if I play that first, well, if I play g7 first, the king just gets in front of it. And then, yes, I would have a check with the pawn over here, but then the king could take this pawn because this pawn wouldn't be defending that one anymore. Wait, I think I just saw it. Okay. If I move this, because again, I have a bishop back here that I wasn't looking for. This bishop can go right down there to h7 and is protecting h7 once this pawn gets out of the way. So I think I have to check with my g-pawn first. The king has to get in front of it. Then, leaving the h-pawn in place because the h-pawn protects the g-pawn and the g-pawn cuts off these squares, and the knight would be cutting off this square where the bishop would then go. Okay, that's got to be it. And the bishop down here is checkmate. 9 points for that one. It was rated almost 2200. Okay, so we can see that one of my weaknesses, besides just checkmates in general, is bishops. I am not seeing long, especially long diagonals from these bishops. Next puzzle. I do have multiple checks in this situation. For example, the queen can check here. Bishop can check down here. Well, that's just 2, isn't it? I think I have 2 checks in this position. What should it be? What happens if I check with the queen? Well, they can just block with their queen or their knight right there. And that doesn't lead to a... Oh, they can't block with the knight, can they? The knight's pinned, but they could block with the queen. Let's see. Check. Well, okay, and they can't move over because my light squared bishop. See, I'm looking for these bishops now. These bishops have long reaches from over there. Okay, so maybe that's it. Queen to f3 check. They can't move the king. This knight's too far away to block. That bishop's stuck behind a pawn, so it can't block. Only the queen can block, and I think that would be the only legal move because, again, the knight is pinned by my dark squared bishop. Okay, so the queen has to block. And then is that mate? I think it is. Okay. All right, I had to not only see the pin, but see that both bishops were pointed in that direction and see this zigzag by my queen from here to here. Very nice. Oh, only 3 for that one. Next puzzle. I have a check down here, but that's not mate. That leaves the king 2 outs. What about this? Because my queen is currently cutting off this square, so the king would have to go to one of these 2, and then that's still not mate because then I couldn't put my queen in here. Maybe I need to put my queen in there first. I think that's it. I think I have to put my queen in there first. Check. King has to move one way or the other. And then would that be mate? No, it would not be. So that's not the mate into. Because here, if the king goes that way, and then I check with the rook, they could block. They could block with the queen. They could block with the knight. Okay, so that's not it. Pretty sure. Let me check that again. Yeah, see, that allows 2 different moves by their king. And then I don't have a safe follow-up check at that point. Because again, oh, my pawn's guarding my queen right there. So yeah. It's okay. That's what I was missing. I have to do the rook first because right now the queen and the knight cannot block there because the king is in the way. Okay, so rook to a8 first, knowing that this square is guarded by the pawn, and then the king has to go to one of these 2 because again my queen's guard would be hitting that one and the rook's knocking off all of these. So the king has 2 choices, and then I put my queen there on e6, and that would be mate. It took me too long to see that the pawn was guarding that square. Next. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. 8 in 13 minutes? Well, I'm averaging under 2 minutes. I guess that's good. But for mates in 2, I should just be seeing these. I have a check in the corner that's protected by the knight, but that would let the king out this way, and then the knight would be under attack. I can check here, though, where my pawn would be protecting the knight. My rook is cutting off those squares on the back rank. Nothing can block a knight, so the king would have to come out to g3, and then I would come up with this rook to e3, and my knight would be cutting off those 2 squares. I think that's it. The difficult part is seeing which squares become unavailable to the king. It helps in these situations that all of those squares are unavailable to the king due to them being white's own pieces, so I know they can't go there. Then the other thing is, of course, seeing which of my own pieces cut off these squares. The knight hits those 2, and then the rook hits these 2. Need more practice at this. It says I am playing with the white pieces, so pretty sure it's not that, because their queen guards that square. And then yes, I could take with the pawn, but then the king gets out. So is it here? What can they do if I check? Wait. Oh, they would have to block with the pawn. Okay, if I check on e4, they block with the pawn. And then again, their own square, their own pieces take away squares. My pawn and king are taking away these two squares. And then I would have, yeah, and then I would take my queen back to e7, going through the diagonal opened up by their pawn. I think that's their only legal move in this position. And then I don't think they have any moves left once I go back there. And of course, their queen's on the wrong color to get back there to block that. Is that 9? I stopped counting, and it might be 8 or 9 or 10. Looks like 9 maybe. I think I'd just be able to count that in a few seconds. But all right, I have a check back here. Again, wrong color. I like the purple. Don't know why. All right, the king then would have to move. I don't think that's it, because the king gets out this way, and then any follow-up check I have, the king can just go around its pawn. And I don't want to check here. I'm pretty sure of that. So what about here? If I check with my queen to g4, that cuts off the whole file, so the king cannot escape between the queen and the pawn. The king cannot escape between its own queen and pawn, like it could if I did on the diagonal. So checking on g4 looks promising. So not only does my queen cut off that whole rank, it cuts off this whole file, leaving the king only 2 choices. And then I think regardless of which one it goes to, I think I would have a mate there. No, not necessarily. If I check here and the king can't go down. My pawn's guarding that square. That's what's hard. Which squares are unavailable to the king? Once I check on g4, the only square available to the king is there. And then moving over to f4 would be mate. And that's like the dovetail or the swallow's mate, because from my queen goes through here. It's due to the positioning of their own pieces is why it's called that. I don't remember which one it is. But that's got to be it. Very nice, 18 minutes. I still need to do more of these. I am playing with the white pieces. I know it's not that. Wait, is it? It might be, because this queen can't get back there to block. I can't even draw an arrow to there, because the queen is not on that diagonal. The only legal move in that position would be for their rook to capture my queen, and then I think that would be mate with my rook. Getting close to 2,000 again, but I'm less concerned with that than I am with just getting better at seeing these checkmates. Okay, now this time their king is not on the back rank, but it's already been pushed off the back rank by a rook check at some point, or maybe it anticipated the rook check. Regardless, my rook is cutting off the 3 squares behind it. With my bishop, I can check here, that's not mate. No, because they block with the pawn. And yes, I could check again, but then the king gets out, so it's not mate in 2. There might still be a mating sequence there, but it's definitely not a mate in 2. So there's something else here. I think I know what it is, right? Is it this? No, because then the king comes out this way. Yeah, for a second I was thinking it was this, and the king would have to go back, and then I would pull the bishop out this way and it would be mate, but that's not it, because the king can come out this way. And yes, I could check again, but then the king has running room, doesn't it? Or does it? Because my pawns cut off all of these squares. And from down there, my bishop would be cutting off these squares. So if I check on f8 and their king comes out here, would that be mate? Rook to c6, because the bishop would be cutting off, again, those 2 squares, and then my pawns are cutting off all of these. Okay, so if the king then went back, then coming out here with the bishop would be checkmate. So I think either way, that is the mate in 2. Okay, it did come out, so it has to be this. Let's keep going. Okay, right now, the knight's not protected, but the knight is protecting the pawn. I can check with the knight, but then the pawn's not protected anymore. I can check with the queen, but that's not going to help matters at all. I could check with the pawn, because again, the knight's guarding here. And once I move this pawn, my queen will be guarding this space, and the pawn will be guarding the knight. This first pawn, the e-pawn, will be guarding these 2 squares, of course. The knight will be hitting that square. So the king, and then my bishop will be coming here. So the king would only have one choice. Yeah, see, this pawn down here is key, because right now it's in the way of my queen and my bishop. Once it gets out of the way, not only providing a protected check, but gets out of the way of the bishop guarding here and the queen guarding here. So the king would be forced back to d3, and then I think my bishop out there to f4 would be mate. Because they can't block that, right? And again, my knight's protected by the pawns. The pawns cut off all these squares, and my knight's hitting that one. From down here, my bishop would hit this whole diagonal right here. The d-pawn was key. It was in the way of 2 of my major pieces. Next puzzle. I'm playing with the black pieces. I only have a bishop and a knight. Seems like I remember that you cannot actually just force a checkmate with a bishop and a knight without help. But in this case, I know I have help. For example, I have a pawn that's cutting off 2 squares and another pawn that's cutting off one of those squares. I also have help in the form of their own knight, which keeps the king from going to some of those places. Okay, I have 2 possible checks in this position, right? I think those are my only 2 possible checks. I don't like this one because their knight is guarding that square and we would just trade knights. And then they're getting pretty close to promoting down here. So I think it must be this check here. Knight to e6. No, we're going the other way. Knight to e3. 6 is down here. Okay. Knight to e3 check. Again, the king cannot come close to my knight because my pawn cuts off those 2 squares. From there, my knight would be hitting these 2, so the king couldn't escape back that way. And my king is cutting off these squares because our kings are in opposition right now. And my bishop is sitting here, down here, guarding this whole diagonal. So the king has to go back. And then I think my bishop down to b2 would be mate, would it not? It was. I have time for a few more. I think maybe 2 more or 3 more. Would be tempting to trade this off, but my opponent has more material left on the board than I do, so there's something else. I'm going to guess it might be here, queen to g6, because from there my queen would cut off all of these as well as this whole rank. My pawn is cutting off that square. My bishop is cutting off that one. And there's nothing they can block with, so they'd be forced forward one, where I have an e-pawn knocking off those 2 squares. And then I think I could just move over one with my queen protected by the bishop, and that would be mate, I think. Good. Next. Oh, I'm playing with white. Okay. So this pawn is coming this way? Yeah, this pawn is coming this way. Okay. We can check with the knight. We can check with the rook. Those are my only 2 checks in this position. My knight guards that square, so the rook could check on g5, but then the king could move over one, and I would not have a mate after that, because I would not have a safe follow-up check. So it's probably not that, is my guess. I have a check back here, and my rook cuts off this whole file, and my king is cutting off these 2. From back there, my knight would hit here, leaving 2 legal moves for the king. And from back there, my knight is guarding h5, where my rook would then go, and my rook would cut off all of these. Does that seem right? Here, rook to h5, because the king can't come back due to the knight and the rook. And from over there, the rook would be knocking in my king. Okay. It's harder for some reason with a knight and a rook, or a knight and a queen. At least for me, but I need more practice. I will get used to it to see which squares around the king are cutting off or cut off. And you can see that even while drawing the circles and using the arrow keys and different colors, I'm still having a little bit of trouble seeing which squares are not available to the opponent's king. I was about to say this might be one of the cases where I have to move a piece first that's not check and then check and it would be mate. But I don't think that's the case here, because not only could their queen hit my queen and I would have to take back, but they could just move a pawn and give themselves another escape route. So it's not that. It might be the check first. Oh, yeah, I think it's certainly the check first, because then that leaves the king only one legal move, and then I check on a4, and that's mate. Yeah, that one I should have only gotten 4 points for, because I think it was relatively simple. It was just a check, and the only 2 checks really in the position. I am playing with the black pieces. My queen is in a nice spot cutting off all of these from the king, and my pawn is cutting off that one. So if there was a safe way to check right now, there's not though. About that. That's not a check. Or wait, is this one of the cases where I give up a pawn to force the king into a new position? It might be. That is a check. Now I do have other checks. For example, I have this queen check down here, but then the king gets away somehow and I don't have a mate. But this is a check that I have, and it's not a safe check, but it is a forcing check, because as we already noted, the king can't go back because of my queen. Its choices would be to take or to move forward. If it moved forward, I would have a mate right there, because my queen would cut off all of those, as well as the escape route back from here. If it took the pawn, which I think is what would happen, then I would have a mate right here. So I'm going to have a mate on one of those 2 squares, either G5 or F4, depending on where the king moves. I think that's it. Okay, it went over there, so this has to be mate because the king has nowhere to go. Okay, and I have time for one more. I haven't reached 30 minutes on my end yet. Playing with the white pieces. Is it going to be a knight check this time? Probably not. Wait, it might be a knight check this time. Okay, because right now my queen is cutting off all of these, and of course the pawn is helping with that square. My bishop is knocking off these two squares as well, and my queen is knocking off that one. So checking down here on e2 with the knight forces their king exactly to e5, no other choice. And then the knight protects that square from my queen, which would be again like a dovetail or swallow's mate because of the positioning of the enemy's pieces. Yeah, because my queen goes through there as well as this way. Okay, well, if you made it this far, thank you for following along. I obviously still need work on this. I've used up 30 minutes here, which is about all the time I can devote just to something like this in one day. And I'm going to keep slugging away at it. I'm going to right now copy the links to these puzzles into the description so that if any of you want to take a look at those puzzles, you can do it too. Or you can just do what I did, which is go on Lichess, use the puzzles menu at the top, puzzles dashboard, and then over here go puzzle themes and scroll down until you see motifs and then advanced. Underneath that is mates, and you can choose checkmate, which I think is all of them, mate in 1, mate in 2, mate in 3, and so forth. Mate in 5 or more? I haven't tried those yet, and I don't know if I'm ready for it. There's also some specific types of checkmate, like Anastasia's mate and so on. Back rank mate, double bishop mate. That one sounds pretty hard. Oh, the dovetail mate. That's the one that I mentioned. Okay, but anyway, that's how you get there. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.